All right, so we're going to start coding this website that we have for you, and we are going to walk you through the process. So this will be one in a series of videos. We're going to take you through building the top bar and the navigation specifically for this website that we've created. So we'll walk you through the process of building it, and then talk you through, the steps that you need to be able to make this navigation functional. So you have the visual, you have created that comp, so you should have all the measurements and things that we need, but I'll talk you through the process and hopefully help you get to the point that you can build this. We're going to start off again with the navigation. So in the previous video, we had set up our initial HTML file and we linked it to our CSS. So before you begin, that should already be done. But we are going to go ahead and start. And one thing that has been added since then is we have added a navigation tag. And that tag is essentially going to be a placeholder for that whole top nav section that we're going to use. Okay. Usually that nav tag is used for any type of navigation in a website. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's there for a purpose. We are assigning it a class, and if you're wondering why, a lot of websites have multiple navigations. So we're going to refer to this as topnav. And we're giving it a class because if we really wanted to, we could reuse it. But we want to make sure that's in place first. So we're going to go ahead and start creating some content here. And if you remember the visual that I just had on screen, I'll just kind of bring it up right there to where we can access it at any point. We've got this logo and then we've got the navigation. Okay, so we've got to create the space for that and we've got to have content in. So I'm going to start with the HTML and we'll just go ahead and get the H1 tag. Now I do have some of this code already coded, so I'm going to go ahead and copy it over just for the sake of time so you can see it. So that H1, we're going to start out with just keeping it as text. A lot of times students are asking, well, how do we get the gradient? A lot of the times we'll use like an SVG graphic. So, but for the sake of time and just starting out and getting things in place, we're going to go ahead and start with the H1. And we are giving it a class of logo because we want this to be different than any other H1 that we might use in the website. Okay. We are also going to create it as a link. A lot of the times links are around logos so that we can get back to home really quickly. In this case, we're using what's called a null link. So anytime you see that pound symbol, that means that it will act like a link, but it's not really going to go anywhere. So once we know all the page names, we can actually type them in. But just for the sake of starting our demo, we're going to keep most of our links that pound symbol until we know exact links that we want. Okay. And notice we're nesting this inside of topnav because if we look at our comp, topnav really is going to encompass this entire white bar that we've got. Okay. So the next step is we've got to get that navigation, and a lot of the times students want to be able to just type a bunch of links because you probably have learned what the code is for a link, but we actually need to put it in a list. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that over, and you'll notice I accidentally copied an extra navigation tag. So we are going to space these over as well. It would help if I tab multiple times. So the way this is going to work is you have each of your links. So they will associate with each one of these links here, okay? And inside of the list item that we have, you will see the link code that opens and then closes. So that link is nested inside of a list item. And the purpose for this is it helps us be able to create navigation just a little bit more effectively, so that we can do more things with it if we really wanted to. Okay. And if you wonder why that ampersand is red, it's because it should be typed that way. Okay. So right now it's just HTML and it's in place. Notice we also have a class on this UL. Again, we're probably going to have more than one UL in a website, so we want to apply a class to it. Just keep in mind, anytime you're creating classes, it's very similar to naming conventions for the web. We usually want to keep it lowercase, no spaces, and no special characters, or it may not work, and never begin it with a number. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'm going to show you what we have so far. It's really not going to be anything spectacular yet. It's just a bunch of content, and all of them are links. So by default, one of the things we want you to identify is that links are blue and default, and once they've been visited, they're usually purple. So we want to style our website so it doesn't look default. So we're going to get into styling. Now, in the previous video, we had linked our CSS. I've removed all CSS since that video just to kind of start fresh, but you know, just keep in mind that background color that we had put in, we may add it back, we may not, but we're going to go ahead and add in certain things that are going to be helpful. First thing is, we have done Google fonts previously in other exercises, so I've copied over some Google fonts that we may use, and I'm going to go ahead and copy over two other things real quick. So the first one is we're using the universal selector. If you wonder what that asterisk is for, it basically means that we are going to apply this style to every HTML element, which basically helps kind of turn off the box model for us. And then we have the body tag, which if you look in our HTML, the moment we put the body tag in our page, everything inside of it should take this style for the most part. Okay, so this is where we're styling the body copy, which is Lotto, and this is where we're going to put the line height, which is just the space between lines of text. And then we have margin, and we have a background color. Okay, so let's take a look and see what we have now. So we changed that background color to that light gray, which is similar to what we had in our previous one. And then we have, you know, fonts changing now and some of the spacing that's changed out for us. Okay. Now, as we go through, we have a lot of things that we can control. One of those things is for the UL, we are going to want to make sure, technically, I think because we have border box, we could probably avoid the margin padding turning to 0, but I usually like to turn it off just in case. We could technically type this in the universal selector for all elements, so we don't have to turn it off every time if we wanted to. But in this case, I'm just going to be selective and do it this way. The list style none means that those bullets that were there on the list before are going to be gone. So, you know, every time we have a UL, right now before I refresh, you see bullets. The moment I refresh, they're gone. Okay, and the margin and padding that I set to 0 now takes all that spacing and indentation away. Okay. All right, next step for us. Let's go ahead and change our H1 and our A color. Okay, because we have the H1, which is, for now, it's our logo, and all of the links, right now they're defaulted to that link color. So if we change this color here, it should change. Let's see what happens. So it's kind of like this different color. And then we are going to start styling this further. Okay, so we're going to start off with that class topnav that we created. So remember, topnav was applied to the nav tag as a class. Okay, and this class is going to set the foundation or the spacing for this whole area here. Okay, so we've got to set things like our width, our background color, our margin. That will allow us to center it. So margin is basically something that we can change the top and bottom values, and then this would be the left and right values. And then justify content space between, that will work in just a minute. So I'm actually going to turn that off for a second because we don't need it yet. I'm obviously referencing things that I've already pre-coded. And then we've got the padding in there. So let's see what happens. And if you're wondering what that border is, I'll explain that in just a second. Okay, so we've got the space in, it's setting the width, it's, you know, got a little bit of padding up here for us. But what is not happening is this border. Let me show you. Sometimes when we code, it's hard to see the boxes. Now, because I set a background color, you can see the box. But if you did not have a background color on a space, you could set a border around something so that you can see it. So I usually like to show that just as a technique, because when you're first starting to learn web design and coding, it's tricky to find things. All right, and I'm going to leave justify content hidden for just a little bit longer because it's not going to make sense until we add in the rest. All right, so let's resume the demo. I had to pause for a second because I had a little glitch on my monitor. So with that said, let's go ahead and look real quickly at our HTML. So we've got top nav, and then we also have main nav. So by default, a lot of elements in HTML like H1s and lists, they are considered block elements, meaning they go to a new line every time we create a new one. Okay, so the way that we want to fix that is using something called display flex. It's essentially allowing us to start using flexbox, which has a lot of possibilities for us to be able to build layouts. So I'll go ahead and create this code here. So the way this code is working is we're grouping. So if you've never grouped before, I just want to explain this. We've got the class topnav. So anytime it's in CSS, it has to have the period. And if we separate with a comma, that basically means that both topnav and main nav are going to take whatever styles we declare. Okay, so display flex again is just going to tell it to display it so that it is not a block item, and it's going to display basically all kind of in line. Okay, so we'll take a look and see what happens. Now it's not perfect, okay, so this is why we have to learn a lot more CSS, and we have to be able to get things into position. So remember, you know, display flex is going to get things by default, everything aligns to the left, and it's going to put things side by side. So now we have to be able to, first of all, go ahead and say space between. And again, this is applying to top nav. So basically anything that's in top nav is going to space between, okay? Meaning it's going to essentially give us equal spacing. So you gotta remember to save before you test. Notice how often I'm testing though. This is something that's very critical for you to learn early on. And that is just that you want to test often, because if you make a mistake or if things, you know, display awkwardly, you can spot them as you're going versus trying to like fix things later. Okay. All right, so we've got top nav, main nav. So let's go ahead and put in our main nav styles. So again, margin 0 auto it's kind of like a quick way to center something. So 0 refers to the top and bottom values. Auto is referring to the left and right values. So any type of block element, the moment you use margin 0 auto, usually it works pretty well. And then we have padding. And again, it works very similarly. So if you only declare 2 values, it will put the top one here for top and bottom values, and the 0 would be for the left and right. Anytime your value is over 0, you have to put the measurement. So in this case, we're going to use pixels, and we'll see what's happening. So it's starting to get into position just a little bit better. Okay, so you can see we've got to style a bunch of extra things, and really understanding what classes and tags we have to work with will allow us to do more. Okay, so let's go ahead and get that logo into position. Remember that each one we gave a class of logo. So we'll go ahead and explain this. We've got a margin of 0, font size, we're using the font family of Slacky, and then we've got, cursive as a backup. Okay, so just in case it does not render, that's what we'll render instead. And then we've got padding on the left of 100 pixels, and I've got a border in because I want to be able to show you the spacing of that, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, so again, anytime you aren't sure of spacing, I would encourage you to just get used to using borders as a visual cue to help you see where things are. So this helps me see the space that I am using, and because I've got that padding on the left, I've got all that white space showing up. Okay, so I'm just going to comment that back out. Now, if you decide to use borders just to help you with a visual cue, I would encourage you to delete them when you're done with them. I'm leaving them in now in case we ever want to bring them back while we're working right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and style our main nav A. So remember, that's a class that I've got. I'll explain this for you as well. So that's that class, and remember, it has to be exactly the same. So the way that I've created it, the only thing different is in HTML there is no period, but in CSS there's always the period for a class. So the way this works is this is basically being more specific, and I am creating a class, and I'm saying if there's a space between my class name and the tag I'm using, it is going to style that tag with all of the styles that I declare. So in this case, I'm declaring a padding, I'm declaring display block, and I'm declaring decoration none. So what decoration none does is it takes away the underline. And then display block for links is really helpful because notice how all of my links kind of collapsed. So this will help us out along with the padding, of course. So we'll go ahead and save and refresh. So then they start to get into position. So we can hover them, but we can't really tell that they are links. So we want to go ahead and style that. So give me just a second. So we're gonna put in a color for the hover. And I think it's like a pink color, so it matches those bright, vivid colors. So you can see that's pretty quick and easy to just throw in a color change. There's a lot of things you could do though. So like we could, create, underlines or overlines or borders on the left or right or whatever we want. For us to be able to create these kind of like buttons, and this is not necessarily a part of the requirement, but I like to show it when we're creating navigations. We do need to be a little bit more detailed in declaring what we want. So for us to be able to create maybe a box around the links, again, this is just something good to know. It's not necessarily required for the project, but as you guys create links, I want to make sure you know multiple ways to create things. So if we set it to display block, that is going to tell the LI to basically act like a block item. And it will then kind of have a box around it. But you have to set a background color for that to actually take place. So let's just go ahead and see what happens. So we'll refresh, and then you can see we've got little boxes behind. So again, that's kind of optional. I just wanted to show it to you in case that's something you wanted. Again, if you wanted to also say like border bottom or border left, we could even do say 2 pixels solid, and this color. And this is just, again, just to show you possibilities. Like there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do creating links with lists. And that is a big reason why we do use lists. It gives us a lot more power to be able to do that, because we can create it, again, like a block element where it takes up more space. Okay, so that is the end of creating this top nav, and we will continue on with this in another screencast. But I hope you found this helpful and hope you are able to successfully complete this. If you have any questions or problems, reach out to us, and we're here to support you.